Alrighty, so I will not be singing. That'd be a good way to ruin this conference. But today, what I would like to do is talk to you about why the biggest thing standing between you and your own startup might just be you. So, over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk you through my own journey from dreaming about building skyscrapers to creating the software for the builders of those skyscrapers instead. So I'll be sharing a few key lessons that helped me get started and helped me get out of my own way. Most of all, I hope to leave you with one thing today: the belief that you're far more qualified than you think you are to do something on your own. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this story takes place. As a kid, I was obsessed with skyscrapers. I remember driving over the Westgate Bridge, eyes wide open, and staring at the Melbourne city skyline. How did those buildings even stand up? That fascination led me to study civil engineering. I liked maths and physics, and this felt like the natural path. By the time I got to university, I'd already tested the entrepreneurial waters, quite literally. I started a business that did swimming lessons in the ocean. I had a pre-Uber private driver service that I ran, and I launched an ambitious but ultimately aimless venture called Money Enterprises that was mainly just to get some business cards. But the real turning point came when I launched my first tech startup. It was called Juffle, or Join Up for Lunch. And the idea came from a simple problem. I was on campus, my friends were on campus, but organizing lunch together was a real hassle. So Juffle would let you post your availability and match with friends for lunch, Tinder style. Now, I had no technical knowledge and I didn't have very much money, but I used what little money I did have to hire a dev shop and start building Juffle. So I spent time on the logo and the trademark and the wireframes, of course, the business cards as well. And somewhat surprisingly, after about 6 months, the app worked. It looked okay to all the designers in the room. This is 2013, okay, so give me a brag. But some of the key features, like the calendar integration and geolocation services, pretty critical things, they got de-scoped early on because of the budget. So, as a result, the product fell short. Users didn't want to manually put their availability out there. It was like self-proclaiming your own loneliness. So without the background syncing and the geolocation tracking, it was dead on arrival. And I was out of money. You can tell my designer had some fun with the AI in these slides. So in a talk where I'm attempting to get you to start something, why am I telling you about my big failure? Because Juffle was the best investment that I ever made. Because it was actually an investment in myself. The experience inspired me to switch from civil engineering into software engineering. I freelanced once I knew how to do a bit of coding, and I worked at hot startups, and then I eventually joined REA Group as a grad. And this is where I got a front row seat to seeing how great products and great product teams are built. That single year that I spent failing with Juffle unlocked a 5-year journey of exponential learning into tech, startups, and product. And more importantly, it taught me that doing creates momentum. Which brings me to BuildPass, my most recent venture, and the one that finally stuck. So BuildPass is an operating system for construction sites. But what does this actually mean? So we handle all of the workflows that happen on a construction site. So everything from scheduling to the document control, the safety, the communication, the alerts, we can do it all. Today, we're almost 4 years in. We've got 650 customers, 40 staff across the world, thousands of projects that are running across multiple countries, and hundreds of thousands of users. But our beginnings were anything but polished. Most of our initial work happened around my parents' dining room table with a whiteboard that I'd purchased at an REA Group charity sale for $50. And one of the favorite rituals that we had back then was what we called the Nug Bash. So we bought KFC chicken nuggets, and the rules were simple. Squash a bug, get a nug. So these times were ridiculous and chaotic, but incredibly productive. We were building momentum and proving to ourselves that we could build something real together. And like many great Aussie founding stories, the idea for BuildPass started at the pub. So friends in construction would constantly complain about the clunky tools that they had to use on a construction site. So I started investigating, calling literally hundreds of people in the industry just to learn from them. And it turns out that one of the biggest pain points wasn't just the workflow inefficiencies, it was the safety compliance. Regulations were complex and ignored, hence builders were exposed. So we started there, a simple app to manage construction site safety. And it was only over time that evolved into something much bigger, a full stack platform for managing construction sites. And this brings me to the first of 7 insights that I'd like to talk to you about today. So, number 1, execution over ideas. The press loves the romantic idea of the genius founder with the billion-dollar vision that just drops out of the sky. But it almost never happens like that. Who in the room has used Slack? Almost everyone. So you might have heard the story that Slack started as a failed video game. Shopify, you probably heard of that too. That came from a snowboarding e-commerce store. So these great companies, they aren't divine strokes of genius in where they're at today. They're simply pivots or evolutions. And these evolutions only happen because the founders got started in the first place. They built something, they put it out into the world. And that act of starting gave them the raw material to work with, the feedback loops to iterate on, and the insight to pivot. No amount of theorizing or planning could have led to what happened next. Execution is everything. When you ship, you learn, you repeat, and you iterate. As PMs in the room, you'll know you unlock this feedback loop. Your users tell you what you need to build. And as Sam Altman says, fast iteration can make up for a lot. It's okay to be wrong if you iterate quickly. Insight number 2, burning the boats. So there's something powerful about committing to a venture and having no clear path back. In mythology, burning the boats meant total dedication to victory. And when you're all in on something, you start learning faster than you ever thought possible. I found that founder years are kind of like dog years. It's taking 7 years of learning and cramming them into one. I've personally experienced this with BuildPass. So in the beginning, Aaron and I weren't working on it full time. We actually built the first version of the platform between the hours of 7 p.m. and midnight while we still had day jobs at REA and C. We actually got our first customers this way. And it's a perfectly valid way to start. So you don't have to quit your job on day one. But there is no doubt that going all in made a huge difference. Once I left my job and committed, I was pulled into every challenge, fundraising, legal, design, customer support, everything. And it really, by burning the boats, you get that extreme level of focus and commitment to what you're doing. And so there will come a time where burning those metaphorical boats is a must. Number 3, be loud and be proud. If you keep your dreams to yourself, no one can help you. But when you say them loudly and proudly, you start to create your own luck. You're inviting serendipity. When I left REA to start BuildPass, I got a LinkedIn message from this guy, Chris Nalmides, from a company called Mindset Health. He was asking if I was interested in an engineering role. Because I was just starting something else, I wasn't. But instead of brushing him off or ignoring it or ghosting him, I played the Uno reverse. I went to Chris and asked him for a meeting to pick his brain on startups, to which he accepted. We had a great chat, we stayed in touch, and then only 6 months later, Chris introduced me to an investor of his, a guy by the name of Sandy Corey, who runs Horizon VC, who was also an early investor in Canva. Lucky Sandy. So he ended up writing the biggest check into our pre-seed capital raise, which was $1 million. And then he also followed on in our seed capital raise a few years later, which was $7.5 million. And it has been a continuous source of reason and inspiration for me throughout my journey. That one decision to be vocal about what I wanted to do and to share my goals genuinely changed the trajectory of our company. Another great example of this is from a friend of mine called Marty. He's the founder of Pylon, and they are really taking on Zendesk in quite a public way. If anyone works for Zendesk, you might have seen them. They're very noisy. Here's the definition of building in public with radical transparency. He shares revenue milestones, product updates, and tough decisions. And he's built a massive community around Pylon as a result. It brings in talent and customers and investors. So when you speak your goals aloud, you create the surface area for opportunity. The more people who know what you want, the more people who can help you get there. And the best time to start sharing isn't after you've launched something. It is before you even start planning. Number 4, signal over noise. When you do start planning and building, a word of warning, everyone is going to have an opinion, and most people's opinions will contradict each other. So sometimes by virtue of the previous insight of being loud and proud about your goals, the constant feedback that you'll get, it makes it more difficult to navigate the path ahead. Friends will tell you it's too risky. Parents might say it's a very competitive market. Investors might straight up call you an idiot. And while that doesn't make them wrong, it also doesn't make them right. So you have to develop a filter. One of the most common pitfalls is listening too closely to the wrong people. And just because someone has experience doesn't mean that their advice should be listened to or that it's relevant to your context. The risk-averse feedback often comes from the people who love you and want to protect you. The problem is, this same love can lead to hesitation instead of inspiration. So while some warnings are worth listening to, others are just noise. The key is to learn to distill everything, break it down, and then build it back up from first principles to make your own opinion. Ask yourself, why are they giving that advice? What incentives or experiences are shaping their view? And is their situation truly analogous to mine? The best founders are synthesists. They don't blindly follow. They take in all the inputs, pressure test them against reality, and decide with clarity. This is extracting signal from noise. And this is how you build something that's truly unique. 5, embrace competition. So some people think that if there's competition, that the idea is not worth doing. But competition just means there's a market. So let's embrace it. Take Zoom. They entered a very saturated market with giants like Skype and WebEx. But they won by being simpler, faster, and more reliable. Linear, who I'm sure we all have heard of, is taking on Jira. Linear didn't invent issue tracking. They just made it dramatically faster and cleaner and more intuitive to use. Stripe took on PayPal, Figma took on Adobe, like the list goes on. So you don't need to invent a category, you just need to improve on what exists. In our case, there was no shortage of construction site safety apps out there. There was heaps of them. And it really didn't take a genius to figure out why there wasn't widespread adoption of these apps. They just weren't that good. Clunky interfaces, the products weren't that usable. So never write off the competition. But also, don't be afraid of them. An interesting pattern that we noticed in our field that our competitors often came from construction. We were tech folk, which brings me to my next point. You want to leverage inexperience. Given our tech backgrounds, Aaron and I knew that we knew how to build great software products, but outside a little bit of laboring and half a civil engineering degree, we really had no construction experience. Rather than letting this be a weakness, we flipped it and made it our strength. When you don't come from an industry, you ask basic questions that others are too embarrassed to ask. You see the inefficiencies that someone from the industry might not see. You notice workarounds and inconsistencies and points of friction that the insiders have become blind to. Let's again think about some of the best companies. Airbnb, founders were not hoteliers. Stripe, the founders weren't bankers. And Uber, the founders weren't taxi drivers. And in many cases, it's exactly this outsider perspective that enabled them to rethink the experience from first principles. People worry that they can only start a company in a space that they deeply know. This is certainly a path. Building from personal experience is a good way. That's a way of doing it. But it's not the only way. So don't rule out industries just because you've never worked in them. Curiosity, persistence, and humility will go a long way. And if you're willing to learn and listen and keep asking the right questions, you can build in any space. And in some cases, a lack of that industry baggage can be the very thing that makes you the best. I have one final insight to leave you with, and this is number 7, unscale yourself. I'm presuming that a lot of you have a wealth of experience in the corporate world maybe, and this isn't a bad thing. You've probably learned a lot about communication and structure and process, and you've mastered your craft. This is all great knowledge, but with a startup, the answer is rarely another subcommittee or a 5-year roadmap. It's quick decisions, it's tight loops, and it's moving really fast. Y Combinator tells founders to do the things that don't scale. What this really means is showing up with intensity and care for every customer, manually onboarding them, writing the thank you emails yourself, picking up the phone when something breaks. It's hustling to understand the problem behind every single feature request. While these things don't scale, they do build trust and loyalty, and most importantly, insights. And they are often the only way to go from 0 to 1. And going from 0 to 1 is fundamentally different from going from 1 to 10 and beyond. We learned this recently in quite a sobering experience when expanding into the US. After almost 4 years of building systems and structure at BuildPass, we tried to apply this now scale-up mindset to a brand new market. We brought playbooks and automations and internal processes that worked really well in Australia, but in the US, we were back at day 0. We needed to rebuild that early stage muscle. We realized we weren't a scale-up over there. We were a startup again, and the things that mattered were talking to users and iterating fast and making the calls ourselves, just like we did in the beginning. We're finally starting to see some traction in the US after many grueling months there, but it only happened after we humbled ourselves, re-embraced the scrappy mindset, and started doing the things that don't scale. So when you combine startup urgency with corporate clarity, you get a really dangerous combination. You get people who can move fast, but also think deeply. And this is a powerful thing that should not be undervalued. So I'm going to quickly recap the 7 insights that I've shared today. Number 1, execution over idea. Start something, build, ship, learn, and repeat. 2, burn the boats. The real growth starts after full commitment to the cause. 3, be loud and proud. Create your own luck by being vocal. 4, signal over noise. Master the art of filtering feedback and thinking from first principles. 5, embrace the competition. Don't be afraid of a busy market. Just win by being better. 6, leverage inexperience. A fresh set of eyes can see what the others miss. And finally, 7, unscale yourself, remembering that going from 0 to 1 requires doing the things that don't scale. Given we've got a room full of product people, whether it's PMs, engineers, designers, or something else, I'm confident that all of you, at some point, you've had an idea or you've thought to yourself, I could do something better. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe you talked yourself out of it. Or maybe you thought you weren't ready. Let me tell you, I wasn't ready either. 4 years ago, I was a graduate at REA Group. Today, I run a global company in a field that I had no right to be in. You don't need permission. You don't need credentials. You just need to get out of your own way. Thank you.